The rest of the story. He was a curious boy, this Danny. Not the sort of curious that got him into trouble, but the kind that made him notice things others missed. Danny grew up in the kind of towns you'd expect to find on a postcard. Towns where the lawns were always trimmed, the neighbors always waved, and the air smelled of freshly baked pies cooling on windowsills. His family moved off in Missoula one year, Sandpoint the next, then Spokane. But the pattern was always the same. A new school, a new neighborhood, and another perfect little town. And yet Danny noticed the imperfections. When he was 8, Danny lived in a town nestled between the mountains and a wide, lazy river. The house next door was white, its paint slightly peeling, but it had a neat picket fence and a flower garden that burst with color in the spring. The family who lived there was on the surface as picture-perfect as the house. The father was a traveling salesman, the mother a homemaker. They had a son a little older than Danny, named Bobby. One evening while Danny was playing in his backyard, Bobby called him over. "You ever been inside our basement?" Bobby asked, his voice low and conspiratorial. Danny shook his head. "Why would I want to?" "Because it's where the monsters live." Danny laughed nervously. Bobby always had a way of saying things that felt like a dare. "Monsters aren't real." "Oh, these are." Bobby's face was deadly serious. "You just have to." The next afternoon, Danny found himself standing in Bobby's basement. It was dark, the air damp and musty. Old furniture and boxes were stacked haphazardly, casting strange shadows. Bobby handed him a flashlight. "Look," Bobby whispered, pointing to the far corner. Danny swung the beam of light across the room, and for a moment he thought he saw something move. A glint of eyes, a ripple in the shadows. His pulse quickened. "See?" Bobby grinned. "Told you." But when Danny stepped closer, the corner was empty. Just a pile of old blankets. Years later, in another small town, Danny's family frequented a local diner. It was the kind of place where everyone knew your name, and the pie was always fresh. One day, while sitting at the counter, Danny overheard the waitress talking to another customer. "Did you hear about what happened to the Petersons?" Danny leaned closer, pretending to stir his chocolate milk. "They found her in the woods," the waitress whispered. "Right behind their house. Poor thing." Danny knew the Petersons. Their house was just down the street, with its cheerful yellow shutters and a tire swing in the front yard. He'd seen their daughter Millie playing outside just days before. "What happened?" the customer asked. The waitress shook her head, lowering her voice further. "Nobody knows, but they say she wasn't alone out there." In his teenage years, Danny's family settled for a while in a town surrounded by dense forests. One summer evening, he and a friend, Jack, went exploring. They found a clearing with a single tree in the center. Its bark was dark, almost black, and its gnarled branches twisted like reaching fingers. Jack dared him. "Bet you won't touch it." Danny hesitated. Something about the tree felt wrong. The air around it was too still, too quiet. But he wasn't going to back down. He stepped forward, reached out, and placed his hand on the bark. For a split second, the world seemed to tilt. Danny felt a strange pull, as if the tree were trying to draw him in. He yanked his hand back and stumbled away. Jack laughed. "You're such a chicken." As Danny grew older, he began to channel his unease into something productive. He took up painting, capturing the strange duality he saw everywhere. Serene towns with something dark bubbling beneath the surface, friendly faces hiding secrets. His work puzzled people at first, but it also fascinated them. One day, while visiting a gallery showcasing his art, an interviewer asked, "Where do you get your inspiration?" Danny smiled, the same polite smile he'd perfected as a boy when people asked him about the strange things he noticed. "From the places I've lived," he said. "What places?" "Oh, just small towns. You know, the kind where nothing ever happens." But he knew better. And now you do too. For the boy who saw too much, who noticed the shadows lurking in the idyllic glow of small-town life, grew up to give us some of the most hauntingly beautiful stories ever told. You know him not as Danny, but as David Lynch. And now you know the rest of the story.